So we're going to teach kids to subtract decimals, and the beautiful thing about this lesson is that it's really a chance to reinforce what you taught with addition of decimals. There's just one small little thing to flag for kids, and so that's really going to be great. Yesterday we learned an important rule for adding decimals. What is it? Why does it make sense? This is a turn and talk and then a share out where you really hold kids accountable for why it makes sense, right? We're not just lining up the decimals, right? We are actually making sure that like things get added. Dollars with dollars, change with change, right? And we can add that zero as like a placeholder, but really that's what we're trying to do, right? So you're reviewing that, let them do this work on the whiteboards. Of course we follow the same rule when we subtract decimals, right? And like, honestly, I might even take a stop here and really make sure kids get what you mean when it talks about subtracting like from like. I drill this into them when we do word problems. I've done that before, and they still don't quite get it. Like, I've seen kids do, and I'm sure you have too, right? Like, cookies minus bags, or people minus cookies, right? I've held up 4 pencils in my hand and been like, take away 2 pens. And I've seen kids actually go and try to take 2 pencils. I'm like, no, take away 2 pens. Oh, you can't do it, right? No, because pencils, you have to take away pencils. Pens, you take away pens. And so same rule here. And I know that sounds like drilling into them the obvious, but it's really not. Like, I don't even know that adults can be very explicit about that. The like minus like thing, we take it for granted because we have such a intuitive understanding. Anyway, so we still, right, have dollars change, right? Now, that's easy, let them do it. This subtraction problem is tricky. And line it up and ask them to tell you why they think it's tricky, right? Because maybe some might be able to tell you right off the bat, and that's gonna really anchor it in their mind and make them feel smart. Be like, guys, first of all, this is a 5th grade standard, but like for sure 5th graders would get tricked by this. Even high schoolers would get tricked by this, right? We have to add a 0 here so that we can actually take the 5 from something. And it's not just important, teachers, to show what they should do, but it's important to explore why the wrong thing might feel right. Not just why the wrong thing is wrong, but why the wrong thing might feel right, right? If this was the problem, we've heard people say, drop the 5. That's like a phrase people talk. You just drop the 5. So sometimes we can just drop the 5. Why? We can drop a 5 on top because it's what we have and we're not trying to take anything away. We can't drop a 5 on the bottom because we're trying to take that 5 from somewhere, right? A lot of times in adding, right, 52 plus 3, we might say, I'm going to drop the 5. Again, why? When we talk about dropping a number, why are we doing it? It's because that number minus 0 or that number plus 0 makes that number still. That's not true here. 0 minus 5 is more tricky. So really taking some time here, and then, and I've talked about this ad nauseum, like this is a topic you have to spiral. Because what you're likely to do is you've reminded them of the misconception, you've discussed it ad nauseum, they're likely to remember it that day. You're gonna do an exit slip that's all subtracting decimals. Again, they're likely to remember it. But when it is one problem in a mixture of problems, are they likely to remember it? Maybe. And that's what we need to practice. Really, it's that when we take a test, alarm bells should go off in our head at certain times, and this is one of those. Don't forget our special cases, other opportunities for alarms, right? What does it mean if we have just a 2? Naked number! There we are. That's what it should look like, right? Here, this is still dollars and change. And so then, again, and kids have erased whiteboards with you this whole time. Let's do this problem. Let's do this problem. More practice. At this point, you've really let go of the reins. You're just like, do it, let's go over it. Do it, let's go over it. Do it, let's go over it. And you're really able to see, right, who's able to just go and do the IP and who you want to hold back and maybe give a little bit more tutoring. One last thing I want to mention, right? This lesson is not, because quote unquote, maybe not differentiated, right? We would teach this whole group. And yet, it can be super differentiated and still taught whole group because there's so many levels of entry, right? At the very most basic level, if I just had a kid who I needed to really still be practicing addition and subtraction, I could, on their IP, line up all the numbers for them in advance, so they're still getting exposure to how it should look when it's lined up, and even putting the 0. So now, literally, all they really have to practice is subtraction, which can be really useful for some kids to keep practicing, right? And they're still seeing decimals and planting the seeds for future work, right? So really valuable. Along that line, I could just do this much work for kids, right? So now they put the 0 and they do the subtraction, right? Along that line, right? I could do just this work for kids. So there's so many ways to kind of scaffold the entry into that, right? And then you could even differentiate up, like, okay, now explain to me what you did, right? Why did you line up your decimals? And even teaching their teammates. So it's really important for us to kind of understand, particularly when we're teaching above grade level, right, that we can't necessarily expect the entire class to reach the same final point, and that this is really an acceptable point for some kids, and this on its own is a really acceptable point for others. And so definitely being cognizant of that is going to be really important.